All right, good day and welcome to today's section of your 30 days of code challenge brought to you by Codeflex. Today we are in day 16 and you are welcome to day 16. And the last time we were introduced into JavaScript, we talked about some syntaxes of JavaScript, talk about variables, JavaScript variables, and some data types. And sorry, and today we'll be looking at um, JavaScript functions and a little about DOM manipulations. We're actually going to have to look at DOM manipulation and some operators because of the task given, so that it will be able to serve as a correction for the task we were given. So we are going to have to delve a little into DOM manipulation. So first, we are going to begin with JavaScript functions. What are functions? Functions are JavaScript way of writing reusable codes, right? Codes which have intention of being reused in other places in your block, in your code base, right? So instead of writing the logic of a particular function, the logic of a particular operation over and over and over again anytime you need them, you just put them in the function. So whenever you need them, you just call the function there. Simple. So that is what JavaScript functions are used for. And there are different ways of creating JavaScript function. We are going to look at the three major ways of creating JavaScript function, one of which is function declaration, second one which is function expression, and the third one which is arrow function, right? When we say function declaration, function declaration usually begins with the keyword function. Function, that is the keyword that begins. So wherever you see an expression, a JavaScript expression starting with function, know that that is a function, right? Just like this, right? I want to create a function that had two numbers together, and I'll say function. This is the first thing I will do. Then I'll give it a name, right? Add. That is the name of my function, of this particular function, add. Then I want to probably give it parameters. So it's just like I'm giving a template of what people are going to do with my function, right? What you are expected to do with my function. So I'm going to give it parameters because I'm adding. If I'm adding, of course, there must be more than one number. So if I'm adding two numbers together, then I'll have to specify them here. For instance, I'm using A and B. You can use anything that is easily remembered by you. So I can say number one or number one, number two, right? That is me giving a parameter. Then I'll now create my function block using the curly brackets, right? Curly braces to create my function block. Now, whatever variable you declare, you can actually declare variables inside your function. The reason why you declare variables inside your function is you don't want this variable to be able to access from any other uh, function, any other block of code, right? You want these variables to only be accessible by this function and everything inside the function. You don't want anything from outside to access it. That is why you are locally creating it inside this place. If you want a function to be global and you want a function to be accessed by every part of your code base, you make that function global by creating it outside of function blocks, right? So what I mean is this: if I now that I create a function and I give it a parameter of a and b, it's almost like I'm creating a local variable a and b, and this local variable cannot be accessed outside of this function. I cannot come outside here now and say console.log. I can't come here and say console.log, right? Console.log e, for instance. It's going to, let's check our console and see what's going to tell us, right? Reference error, a is not defined. Sorry, sorry about that. A is not defined, so it is undefined because I is not able to access A, right? So that's why it has said it's undefined. So that's just it. That's the reason why we say it's not global. So I can come here and say return. I want this function to return a plus b, right? That is what I want the function to do. So after creating a function, does it mean they now function as a function? No. Whenever you want to use it, you have created a reusable block of code. So whenever you want to use it, now what do? You call the function, right? Now I have created a function. It's now left for me to call that function. How do I call it? By calling the name of the function, which is add, right? I'll say add parenthesis, right? I have called the function like this, but the function, say in the function I have to provide value, right? I have to provide argument for the parameters that have been put in the function creation, right? So it is now left for me to now decide on what value do I want to give to A, what value do I want to give to B. And these are the basics and the fundamentals you need when you are doing DOM manipulation, because you are going to take your values from probably an input value, right? When you create a form, you want to get the value of that form input. If it's a number, you want to get it and use it here, right? So, but now since we are not manipulating anything, right? I will just give it static value. I will say 4 and 5. Yeah, we expect to see the results in my console, but yet we are not seeing it because the reason is simple, because I've actually not logged anything to the console. So to log this to the console, all I need to do is to wrap this inside console.log, console.log, and give it a bracket, open and close, and put that inside just like this. So now we have our value there now. So whatever value I change here, I can even say 12. Oh, sorry. I can say I want here to be 12 and that will be 17. You know, just like that. I want this to be 13, that will be 25. So you see that is how to create function using function declaration. Then there is another way of creating our function using function expression. Sorry, function expression, right? Using function expression, you create a function and you give the name to a variable, right? It's just like I'm creating a variable, but I'm assigning a function to that variable, right? I will say const, for instance, add. This is a variable name add, right? But I want it to be a function. I'm assigning a function to it, a, b, right? And then this is it. So this is going to do the same thing, return a plus b, right? And then when I come here to call my, let me just do it direct, console.log add, and I'm opening and closing and adding 10 comma 12. So we are going to see 22 there straight up, right? That's just the difference. The difference is just that this one is is like me declaring a variable, right? And assigning function to that variable. That's why it's called function expression. Then the last one we are going to look at today before we quickly move on is arrow function, right? Arrow function is just like function expression, except that is the keyword function is missing, right? So if I say const add, for instance, and I give it this, instead of using function, I will use this to represent function. Sorry, this is what I will use to represent my function. And this is the main reason why it's called arrow function. You can look at something that looks like an arrow, right? So this represents my function, so I don't need to write my function keyword. The next thing I'll do is to create my block and do the same thing in here. Sorry, I'll put my variables in here, a, b, and if I come here and say I want the function to return a plus b, right? And come out here and console.log, sorry, add 12 12, right? We are going still going to see it working perfectly. So these are the three major ways of creating your function, and they are not just existing for existing sake. They have different situations where they are best useful, right? So your situation, the situation where you want to use your function is going to determine the suitable type of function creation method that you will use right there, right? So without wasting much time, I after having said this, we will also want to quickly look at DOM manipulation. I have to look at DOM manipulation. Sorry, let's first of all talk about operators. Um operators are signs that allow us carry out operations in JavaScript, right? Just like you have mathematical operators, you have your plus, your minus. They are similar to what you also have in JavaScript. You have your add or your plus operator, your minus operator, your uh, times, your multiplication operator, which is asterisk, your slash, which is a division operation operators. Then you have your equal to, your what's it called? Greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Then you have equal to and strictly equal to, like that. But for the purpose of today, because we're trying to fix the task that was given, we will just pick what we are going to use to fix that task. And since the task so you should create a simple calculator that had two numbers together. You are going to look at add operator and also DOM manipulation, because you need to have a glimpse of what DOM manipulation is before you be able to complete that task. Now, what is DOM manipulation? DOM manipulation simply means um, um, I'm sorry, DOM simply means document object model, and DOM manipulation simply means you manipulating your document object model. Now, when I create my HTML, for instance, this is my HTML, right? You can see that this is my HTML. If I come to my DOM, if I come to this place, element, you will see the same thing in here, right? Look at it, body, header, aside, main, footer, right? Now, what does it mean for me to manipulate my DOM? I can create element and add it to my documentary, right? I can remove elements from my documentary. I can impute values. I can do so many things with my document tree, right? These are what is referred to as DOM manipulation. Me manipulating DOM. The fact that I'm using JavaScript to manipulate DOM does not mean that whenever I make changes to my DOM using JavaScript, it's going to come to my HTML here and you will see the changes. No, you are not going to see the changes. My DOM is a representation of my HTML in the browser, right? So manipulating it stays in the browser. It doesn't extend to my HTML file that I have in my system. So everything is done in the browser. The documentary is being manipulated and things can be ejected and removed. That is what DOM manipulation is all about. And in DOM manipulation, every element acts as an object, but we are not going to talk about that because we've actually not talked about objects, right? So looking at how we can quickly use everything that we have talked about this morning. It's morning here. So we are going to first look at we are going to create our calculator. We have going to first look at our HTML and CSS before we move to JavaScript. But to make everything fast and easy, I have actually created the HTML and the CSS. I will just unfold it. Now, if we come to this place, let me take this off. You see that I want to put my calculator inside of this aside, right? So you see that my aside is now clear because I want to put my calculator there. And this is my aside in the HTML. I have added the markup. I just want to comment it. Now you see what I have here as my calculator, right? This is my calculator. So the only thing you see there is a div, a container that's with a class name calculator, and you have h2, which is the heading I mean. Then you have another div which contains all the input number one, number two, and um the button, the input type button. Then you have the result where the result is going to display, which is actually here. Then we'll go to our styles. I have also added the style and commented it out in this place. Now this is the calculator. This is the calculator, which is the general container for that's my calculator. I want to take it off and put it here, right? So you can now see that my calculator is here like this. Then it has a function display flex direction column, and align items to center, which is just basic CSS. Then also the next one is the input container, which is the container that contains all the inputs. I mean, the where you enter your numbers, where you enter uh, uh, your number one, number two. That's the two numbers that you want to add together, and then the button. Because if you look at my HTML, I actually use input to also create my button. This is it. It's an input. I just give it a type of button so it can function like a button. Then the next thing is the input itself, right? We want to go into the input container and get the inputs and add styles to them, right? So come here and do this, and you see that our input now have height of 2 rem. They have padding inline, that is padding from left to right of 1 rem. They have border of no border. That's why you are not seeing any border. Then they also have a border radius of 5 pixel, right? You are not seeing them now, but you will see them soon. Then now, what I want to do is I don't want my button to have borders, but I want my inputs for the two numbers to have borders, and they are all inputs. The three of them are inputs. Sorry, I'm going to have to use an advanced CSS here, in as much as I can just give it a class name and style it separately. But I purposely want to use advanced CSS so that this is how we'll be getting along and be understanding one or two things as we are going along side by side, right? So I am going to take this out. What I'm going to do is I have said that all my inputs should not have border. That's me resetting it. I reset my input to not have border. Now I want to now see some should have border, some shouldn't have. And what I use here is this. I went into my input container and select input. So I'm applying border to all, sorry, okay. So I'm applying borders to all my inputs except the one that is button. So how did I do that? You see that I went into my input container, I selected inputs, all the inputs. Then I now specify that except this one. So what did I use? I used the not pseudo class, right? I used the not pseudo selector to select all input except, so whatever is inside the not is not going to have that style. So what I simply mean is select all input except the one that has a type of button. So give the rest a one piece is it one piece solid gray except the one that has a type of button, and that's exactly what you see on the screen here. They all have the other two inputs have a border of gray 1 pixel, but button, the one that has a type of button, does not have that. So now let's go further to style our inputs that has a type of button separately, right? So I will just come down here and also comment that out. So these are the style. We give it a height of 2.5 frame, give it a background color of this, and a font size of 1.5 frame to make it big, and then a text transformation of uppercase, because if you look at it, it's not actually uppercase letters. Where is it? Where do we have it? Okay, look at the value here. Calculate. It's not actually an uppercase, it's even a lowercase, but I converted it to uppercase using the text transform, the CSS transform property to transform it to uppercase. So if I say, I can also say capitalize, and it will become, the first letter will be capital and every other thing will be lowercase. So I want to leave it at uppercase. Then I also add a transition of 0.2 seconds because I want it to actually transist, right? Then we are going to also take this off and put it here, right? Let's be going gradually. The next thing we did to input is, before now, right? Before now, you see that when I click on it, there's nothing that shows, there's no different, no sign. So sometimes users do not know whether they are actually clicking. They are clicking and they are not seeing anything, nothing is happening on the screen. So they begin to doubt whether their mouse is working, or are they clicking at all? Is the button even clicking? So that is why the use of um sorry the use of this active pseudo class is very important, to say that I'm scaling 0.0.95, right, whenever the button is active. So now when the button is active, when I click on it, you will know that I have clicked on it, just like this. You see that there's a sign that, something is happening, there's an interaction with that button, right? So that's that about that. Then the next thing we are going to look at is the hover effect. Now when we hover, oh sorry, when we hover, that's when our cursor pointer is on it, we want to see something to show that, okay, we are right on the button. So now you see that there's a darker background when you hover on it. Then when you click, it's chaos, right? All right. So the next thing there is, we are moving into the result container where our result is going to display. So this is where our result is going to display, right? So all we did there was give it a height and a width of 20 rem and a font size of and a font size of 40 pixel. We display this grid because we want everything that's coming inside to be at the center. Anything that is coming inside becomes what? Becomes a grid item, right? And we want all the items to be at the center of that box. That's why we are giving it a place item center. Then we also give it a border of 2 pixel green so that it's visible. That is all about our CSS. I didn't want to do much about CSS because we are actually in JavaScript. So now we are moving to JavaScript, right? So I'm going to have to remove all those explanatory JavaScripts, or let me just add a comment here like I did to others and say function arrow function, and then also take all this out. So now we want to move to JavaScript proper and use JavaScript, right? Now, something is not right with this, right? Yeah, you can see that the calculator has actually increased. Sorry. Okay. Okay. There's an overflow, right? Because the calculator is okay when we are on a smaller screen. Okay, okay, we have actually used media query, but you see what is happening. Once we are shrinking the screen smaller than that, although it doesn't have to be smaller than that, this is actually small enough for your phone, no matter how. But if you shrink it more, it's going to be, the reason is just because we have an absolute weight of 20 rem. If we had made it a weight of 100%, we wouldn't run into that, right? So I think I scattered our grid, our main grid, but that's not what we are looking at actually. So I'll fix that. So let's just look at our I need to even take this off. Let me go and off the grid so that this can be on the full screen. We have that here, right? Let's take all of this off in that section like this. Good. Oh, we have to mess with everything. Okay, let's just leave it. Okay. Meanwhile, let's dive into JavaScript. Let me take this off so that we can be seeing our calculator, right? Or let me still reduce this a little. Okay, so now we have our calculator like this, but we can get our value, say 3 plus 3, but nothing is happening because we have actually not added, excuse me, we have actually not added the logics that say that you should understand all that. So that is what we do with JavaScript, right? So the first thing I want to do, I want to go to my HTML from my JavaScript and get all the numbers that I will need, get the buttons that will be clicked for something to happen, and also get what where the result is going to show. So all I need to do is I want to use class selector to get all those values. And you see, numbers have a class name of number one. The second one has a class name of number two. Then the button, I will just use the type to select it. Then the results have a result container. Okay. So now what I will do is I will first of all our calculator um logics starts below. Right? Because it's starting below. Okay, calculator logic starts below. So the first thing I want to do is to declare a variable for my input one and input two, right? And I want to give them number one. So I want to say number one and number two. So I want to say let number number one equal to, I want to get that document. I want to get it from my document, right? From my HTML. So I'll process everything with document dot, because I want to use a class selector. The best thing to use is query selector. Query selector allows you to select an element based on its CSS selector. It allows you to use CSS selector to select a particular element on your HTML. So that's why I want to use query selector. So I want to use query selector and I want to select with the class name, right? So I'm going to select like I'm selecting my classes in CSS, which is I'll start with dot and say number one, right? So that's me selecting that. And I'll also select let number two equal to document dot query selector number two, right? Then I want to select the button. I will still say let add bit or it's calculate, right? Let's say calc calc btn, which is button, is equal to document dot query selector, and I want to select it with the same CSS selector, which is input type. I want the type to be of, because I have double quotation outside, I want to use single quotation inside for it not to conflict, right? So I want to say input type of button, right? Just like this and like this. So that is me selecting that. Then the last thing I should select is my container, right? My results. Let me call it result box. Results bx, right? Is equal to document dot query selector And what's that class name? Sorry, the class name is what? So results container, right? Results container. Don't forget that it must be exactly the same. There can't be pardon for any typo. Okay, now we have gotten all the necessary elements we need to get from our document, right? It's now time for us to tell them what they should do, right? Now, for instance, if I say, let's say, okay, let me console.log. It's going to cause issues. Okay, let me just take it up to that place. All right. So I want to log my result one. Don't forget that I have just what I selected for number now is the input. I have not gotten the value. For me to get the value, I have to use dot value, right? So if I console.log, for instance, sorry, console.log number one, right? Let's see what it's going to say. You see that it's giving me an input. Look at it right here, because number one that I have selected is actually an input. But for me to say get the value of number one, I have to say dot value, right? So it's going to get whatever is entered as value of number one. So if I come to number one and actually assign it a value, this is my number one, right? I can come here and add value attributes, right, of say 10. If I give it a value attribute of 10, you see that 10 is appearing in my console. But because I don't want a static value, I want to get a value that users enter, right? So I will come to my JavaScript and say dot value and leave it there. So whatever users enter is what is going to appear in my console. But for now, there's no function that says that it should do that and it's not going to do that. So that is that about that. Now we want to create a function that allows us to now do our calculations, right? Like I said, we are going to use function declaration. I will say function and I will say add, right? And I have created my function. It doesn't have to, it's not compulsory for you to use parameter. Why you can use parameter, you may decide to not use parameter depending on how it suits what you want to do, right? So now what I want to do is I want to declare total here, right? Which I don't really need outside. So that's why I'm putting it inside the function, and I'll say let total equal to number one, right? Sorry, sorry. Sorry. Number one plus number two. Sorry, I didn't add value because I'm actually getting the values. Dot value, right? So this is what I want to get. I want my total to be the summation of the value of the two numbers gotten from the input, right? So that's that about the function. And I want to also console.log this to test. Like I said, your console can be used to test your code, right? To see if we are doing right. I want to console.log total, right? So and I will call the function here to say add. I want to see whether our function is running. So if I say 10 and I come to number two and say 10, I click on calculate. You see what we have, right? We are getting 10, 20, right? Normal is not supposed to work, right? But it's working because I have added the add function. I have called the add function, right? And that is why it's running here. But ideally, I'm not supposed to run it here, right? And if I still do 10, sorry, it's still showing. You will now be wondering, why is it showing? I have not added that when I click on the button anything should happen, but the truth is that I have called the function in my HTML here. Look at it here. If you look closely, when I came here, you will see that I already called that function here using the on click attribute of my HTML, right? So what I'm saying is, whenever this button is clicked, that is what the on click attribute does. Whenever this button is clicked, call this function. That means this function should execute, this function should run. So that's exactly what is happening, and that is the reason why you see it working. If I take it off, right, it does not understand that it should add anything, and you are not going to see, nothing is going to work. If you click 100 times, nothing is going to work. But with this, it will work, right? Now, another issue we have is, this is 12 and this is 12. I added them and I'm getting 12 and 1 2 1 2, right? Which is not what we want. The reason is, this is very simple. In as much as my input type is number, right? What my JavaScript is going to get from an input is a string. So what the JavaScript has just done is what is referred to as string concatenation, right? It's actually concatenating the string, right? It's taking 12 as just 1 2, and it's taking 12 as 1 2, and it's concatenating them together as 1 2 1 2. It's not seeing them as a number. So in this case, what do? We have to convert our values to number before we have the power to perform number operations on them. So how do we do that? We come to number and just pass integer, right? Convert it to an integer by saying pass integer, int, right? And put it in brackets. And I will do the same thing to the other number, pass, just like this. And I'll cover this one too. So that's all. Now JavaScript now understand that they are numbers and not just strings. So if I say 12, 12 now and calculate is 24, is now a number, is now seeing it as a number, right? But we don't want, what we want is that we want our results to show in our result box and not in the console, right? So how do we do that? Instead of using our console, we'll come here and call our um what's it called, result box, right, which is up there. So we say result box dot, we want to get our result box and we want to replace its test. It actually does not have test, but we want to put a test inside. Now we want that test to be what? To be the result of the addition from the total of number one and number two. So it's going to be dot inner test, right? Sorry, take this off, my friend. Dot inner test. Then we assign it a value of what? To that, right? And that's all. So when we see 12, 12, for instance, it's not working. And why is it not working? Say cannot set properties of null to inner test. So let's be sure that we got our result box correctly. There must be a typo. Result container. Let's see our HTML. Whether it's actually, I've seen the bug. Let's see. Result box is a class, but we didn't precede it with dot. All right. So that's the error. Let's say 24, 24. I want to calculate, and you will see that we have our 24 boldly there. Even if we say 300, 300, and we calculate, it's going to be 600. It's as simple as that. But there's another problem. If I need to calculate another thing, I have to come and clean all this first. Say 14, I have to come and clean this, say 12, before I can calculate, right? So we can actually add an instruction that says that whenever we calculate. That means whenever a button is clicked, the input should be wiped empty so that we don't need to come and be cleaning before we put another values, before we calculate for another things. How do we do that? We will just say that our number one, for instance, number one dot value, after the button has been clicked, it should be empty string. And we do the same thing to number two dot value, and we also assign an empty string to it. So now when once we write 12, sorry, once we get 12, 12, and we click, it's going to be empty, ready for us to put another number. We don't have to be cleaning and cleaning and cleaning, right? So that is that about that. Now we don't need console.log. Console.log is just to test, so we can now take it off, right? And this is all you needed to create your JavaScript, sorry, to complete your task. Nothing more than this, right? Then also, apart from having to come to, there's another way I can actually add this function to my, what's it called? Add execute this function without having to come to my HTML to come and add this. So what I want to do now is I want to take this off, right? I'm taking this off like this. Now, ideally, it's no longer going to work, right? Because I'm not calling the function anyway. So I can also call this function right in this place, right? So I'll just use add event listener. And where is the button? That is why the button is created here. You see that we have actually not used it, but I want to use it here now, and I want to say that where is it? Cac button, right? And I want to add an event listener, and I want to say the event I'm adding is click, right? And when I add click, I want the add function to run, right? So now when we say 12, 12 and calculate, is going to run, right? Simple. You see that we don't we I just did everything inside JavaScript and didn't have to go to my HTML to go and add anything. So without creating this function in here, without creating this function, I can also still create this function inside of this place. All I need to do is, I just want to show how you can use your function expression or use your arrow function, why they are important. Ideally, I'm supposed to come here and come and write function, this, but with arrow function, I will just come here and do like this and say, and just create my block and take all this inside this block and put it here, right? And take this off, right? And when I say 12, 12, it's still going to work, right? It's still going to work. You say I just use arrow function there. Then I can also use my function declaration here by just saying function. Sorry, sorry. Okay, so I did this, and you see that we having issues, right? Oh, what am I doing? Right? You see that when I do this, it's still going to work. Sorry, it's still going to work. This is me using function declaration just as it is. It's just like me taking it from up there and coming to paste it here. So there are just the different way can work. Just that there are specific situation where you would rather use some, because probably because they help you to write lesser code, and they are easy to squeeze into that situation and they will still function well. So I want to take it back to when we have just one line, just this, right? Okay. So Um, Thank you so much for being so patient to the end, and your patience is really important to us. I want to say thank you to Codeflex for making this a reality once again. Please like, share, and also comment, and I will see you in the next section. Thanks and bye.